The rain made the city smell of hot asphalt and coffee as Andrew Calloway sat alone at a window table in his favorite restaurant, watching droplets race each other down the glass. The table was set with fine china, a folded napkin, and a phone that buzzed with private jets and board meetings, but the only sound that cut through the soft jazz playing over the speakers was the distant laugh of children in a courtyard below. At 47, he owned companies that painted skylines and portfolios that could buy small countries, and yet there was a weight in the way he clasped his fork that no ledger could explain. His suit fit like armor, his watch announced his punctuality, and his eyes looked past the room as if searching for a name he had misplaced. For all his outward command, there was a hollow that money had never learned to fill. He closed his eyes and remembered a small brown teddy with one ear sewn on with blue thread. The toy had been lost and found more times than he could count, a consolation prize in a childhood that taught him value in silence and excellence in results. He had built his life as one builds a fortress, stone by stone, until the view from the top was only wind. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Sir, are you sad?" Andrew looked up to see a little girl, no older than 7, standing by the table with a teddy in her small hand and rain beads on the frayed cuffs of her jacket. Her hair was in 2 uneven braids, her shoes had seen better streets, and her smile was both offered and cautious. The question was simple, delivered without accusation. It landed like a small, decisive stone in a pond of appointments and profits, and the ripples were immediate. "Why do you ask?" Andrew said, surprised at how gentle his voice sounded. The girl tilted her head and pointed toward the courtyard, where a man in a coat argued into a phone, moving like he was corralling a storm. "He works a lot," she said. "My dad says he is doing it for us, but he never has time to braid my hair. He does good at numbers. He does not do hair." Andrew found himself laughing and then quieting, because the laugh tasted like something he had not believed in for years. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily," she replied, and Andrew noticed the way Lily hugged the teddy as if it were a lifeline, the fabric worn soft at the paw where a thumb had pressed too often. Lily then asked the thing that would change the day and then the rest of Andrew's life. "Will you teach my dad how to braid my hair for Saturday? He says he will try, but he gets stuck on the first loop." The request was so small, so specific, that it fit perfectly through the crack in Andrew's carefully sealed life. He had no experience braiding, but he had taught CEOs how to listen. He had also, until that morning, never considered that learning to braid could save a life. Backstory. Andrew had been the youngest of 3, born in a small town to a single mother named June who stitched uniforms at the factory and taught him that keeping a promise was more valuable than any coin. As a child, he learned to count thread and seams, to fold things so they would hold, and to hold himself so others would not have to. He kept the small brown teddy hidden in a trunk for years, the only concession to softness in a house that prized resilience. In his 20s, he left for school, not out of rebellion, but out of an obeyed plan. And he learned to trade the language of small towns for the sharper grammar of markets and contracts. He climbed with the methodical aggression of someone who felt he owed the world proof that he had been right to leave. When his mother fell ill and he could not be back in time, the ache that followed was cataloged and filed as something to be managed, not felt. Presently, he was a man who could command a fleet of private jets and yet could not name the last time he had sat through someone else wanting to tell him about their day. He kept his hands clean for white-collar tasks and had swapped tenderness for timetables. The childhood teddy, the factory noise, the missing presence of a mother at the bedside were small fingerprints on his heart that he never polished out. Those fingerprints mattered now because a child with a remade teddy was looking at him as if he might be the missing map. The encounter in the restaurant continued with a sequence of exchanges that felt like a negotiation between 2 worlds. Lily would not take no for an answer. "He tried once and made a knot that looked like a bird's nest," she said, sounding equal parts embarrassed and hopeful. Andrew, amused and disarmed, asked to meet her father. "His name is Peter," Lily said. "He says sorry a lot. He works nights and brings home pizza with extra cheese." Andrew looked toward the courtyard and saw Peter, 34, arguing into his phone with a voice that fluctuated between apology and defense. He had a coffee stain on his jacket and a grocery bag that threatened to open. In the following back and forth, Peter came to the table to explain. "Mr. Calloway, I did not expect to find you here, but Lily insists," Peter said, looking as if he had stepped from a different story. "I will not lie, I am tired. I do not know how to do hair." Andrew responded, "Then we will teach you. Bring him Saturday morning at 9. I will not braid anything, but I will pay a teacher, and we will have pancakes. Let us see what happens." Peter hesitated. "Are you sure? I do not want to take advantage." "This is not a favor," Andrew said. "This is a lesson for both of us." Lily clapped and hugged her teddy. The agreement was small on paper, but heavy with unspoken possibility. At this moment, we pause to ask you a simple question. If you were face to face with a choice that costs you nothing and means everything to someone else, would you say yes? Share one sentence in the comments, starting with, "I said yes when," and then tell us what happened. Your words might encourage someone who is waiting to take a step that could change everything. The first day was a mix of awkwardness and surprising ease. Andrew rented a small community center kitchen, sent his assistant Maria to arrange flowers, and hired Rachel, a local stylist, to teach basic braiding techniques. There was the smell of syrup and coffee, the sound of spoons against plates, the sight of sunlight pooling on a linoleum floor, and the tactile memory of hair sliding through fingers. Lily watched like a hawk, her teddy sitting on a chair with its head cocked. Peter was stiff at first, his hands clumsy when Rachel guided them. "Grip here," Rachel said patiently. "Not like a handshake, like holding a secret." "What does that mean?" Peter asked, wiping his palms. "It means move slow. Think of the child, not the clock," Rachel said, smiling. Andrew found himself sitting between them, trying to translate patience into practice. The room smelled of syrup and shampoo, and a tang of lemon from the cleaning spray. "This is harder than spreadsheets," Andrew admitted, laughing. And Peter answered, "At least with spreadsheets you do not have to ask permission to make a mistake." They practiced, failed, laughed, and tried again until Peter's braid formed something that resembled an actual plate. The first braids looked like makeshift victory flags, shaky but earnest. That afternoon, Andrew learned to fold pancakes and to make a small paper crown for Lily out of a receipt that had his company's logo. The rituals were simple but precise, and they began to bend the edges of solitude. Over the next weeks, a pattern formed. Andrew had never expected routine to be the bridge, but routine became their scaffolding. On Mondays, he would have a short call with Maria to clear his schedule for family practices. On Wednesdays, he would drive to Lily's school and watch from a distance as Peter and Lily coordinate backpacks and tiny umbrellas. On Saturdays, they had breakfasts that stretched into afternoons, weaving in visits from secondary characters who entered and stayed in their orbit. Omar, the janitor from the community center, brought homemade jam and stories about his own grandchildren. Dr. Evans, the pediatrician, dropped in once with tips about comforting a child after nightmares. Sophia, the social worker, checked in with paperwork and practical advice, not to interfere, but to make sure their steps were steady. Tom, the neighbor from the building across the street, offered old board games, and Chef Daniel from Andrew's main office volunteered to cook pancakes on one particularly rainy morning. Each person left fingerprints of care, small shifts in language and expectation that would otherwise never have arrived. The men and women who entered Andrew's life taught him that belonging is an accumulation of attention, not an instant purchase. 3 moments of tension defined the middle of their story, and each lingered like a held breath. The first came when Peter received an unexpected job offer that required longer hours and a relocation to another city. They sat in a quiet kitchen where Lily hummed at the table and the rain learned to tap at the window. Peter said he could not refuse the money, that his daughter deserved stability. Andrew felt the old calculation of value push against his chest. "If you go," Lily whispered without looking up, "will you still braid my hair sometimes?" The question reduced them all to choices. The second moment arrived when a rumor began to spread in the neighborhood that Andrew had ulterior motives and that his wealth bought affection. Voices rose in a local forum, and a columnist suggested that Lily was simply a prop. The sting of that suspicion tested how authentic any bond could be. Andrew answered public scrutiny by inviting the community to a shared pancake morning, and he let people watch him fail and try again. The third quiet crisis was personal. One night after everyone had left, Andrew opened the trunk where the old teddy had slept and found it worn but whole. He recognized that his life had been a ledger of rational decisions that never allowed for tenderness. For a long time he sat on the floor and let the weight of all the days he had missed settle around him. Each tension demanded a decision, and each decision required courage that was not visible on any balance sheet. The development of their relationship was slow and precise. They learned to sew their mistakes together. Andrew taught Lily how to iron a napkin into a perfect square, and Lily taught Andrew how to fold paper boats that would float in puddles after the rain. Peter learned to call Lily at lunch with a voice that was not hurried. Rachel taught Andrew to braid well enough to make a child beam, and Andrew taught Peter to listen to Lily's stories about school without correcting dates or facts. The community named them in small public ways. At a local school fair, Sophia arranged for Lily to sit on a small stage, while Andrew and Peter demonstrated pancake flipping and basic hair care in a joint workshop called Dad and Me. The event was covered in a local paper that used a photo of Lily holding her teddy and both men laughing. That public recognition did not erase private work, but it validated a transition. Andrew introduced Lily to art exhibits he had never attended before, not as a sponsor, but as a companion. And Lily introduced him to the simple joy of getting mud on his shoes and not immediately cleaning them. They learned recipes and stories, and their home rituals multiplied. Names became part of daily sentences. Maria would yell from the kitchen, "Are you coming for lunch, Andrew?" Omar would tap on the window and call, "Coffee on me." Dr. Evans would remind them, "Sleep before 9, Lily." Each small exchange stacked until the shape of family began to form. The climax arrived in a place neither of them had imagined. Peter faced a crisis at work where the expectation to travel soared, and he considered accepting the promotion that would take him away. Lily overheard a conversation and curled into her teddy with such force that the fabric strained. Andrew found himself at a crossroads where he could shrink back behind the safety of his bank accounts or step into something that required vulnerability. One evening, they sat on the community center steps, air sharp with coming rain and the city lights winking on like cautious stars. "I do not want to lose her," Peter said, voice raw. "I do not want to fail my daughter and then fail you." Andrew answered, "I have spent my life avoiding emptiness by buying space. I am tired of that strategy." The dialogue continued long and honest. "Are you ready to make a promise you cannot cancel?" Andrew asked. "I do not know what ready means," Peter said. "I only know what matters when I hold her at night." Lily climbed onto Andrew's lap and whispered, "Do you promise to come for pancakes when Papa is away?" Andrew felt something like a contract written not on paper but on skin. He promised, and the promise was not a legal formality. It was a reorientation. The city outside went on selling time in minutes and meetings, but inside that small circle they made a different economy. The decision was not about money. It was about presence, service, and the work of showing up. The resolution came with celebration and witness. They did not have a wedding or a legal ceremony, but they held a community gathering at the park where Lily had first approached Andrew with her teddy. Friends and neighbors came, and secondary characters arrived like a small constellation. Sophia brought cupcakes. Rachel braided 100 little braids for children who wanted to learn. Omar set up a small table with jam, and Daniel cooked pancakes with a smile that said, "I have important work now." Even the local columnist who had doubted them attended and wrote a different piece that called their arrangement a model of intentional care. They planted a small tree and tied a ribbon around it. Peter read a short note he had written to his daughter about choosing to be present. Andrew read a paragraph that began with, I used to think money could buy everything, and ended with a promise to be there for school plays, scraped knees, and silly bedtime themes. The park filled with voices, and the group hugged in a circle that included people who had first been strangers. The performance of their family became less about demonstration and more about habitual empathy. The epilogue arrives in the measured time of months and unhurried mornings, and it is a quiet archive of change. 1 month later, Lily came home from school with a paper crown and a note that read, "You are brave today." Andrew taped the note to his office wall, not as decoration, but as a relic. He had rearranged his schedule to reserve afternoons for check-in calls and weekend practices. 3 months later, the three of them had a ritual on Sunday evenings, where they cooked a soup together, each person responsible for one ingredient, a small ceremony of contribution and gratitude that taught Lily the language of mutual effort. At 6 months, Peter had turned down the promotion that required relocation and instead accepted a job with fewer hours that allowed him to be present for the mornings and the braids and the small emergencies that never make it into resumes. They began looking into formalizing guardianship in a way that respected both of their roles and honored Lily's desire for stability. Andrew started a small foundation that funded community centers, not as a way to purchase forgiveness, but as a method of planting infrastructure where belonging could grow. He learned to sew small patches onto Lily's teddy when the seams came loose, and to read a book aloud with a voice that surprised him by how much it trembled with feeling. Sunday mornings produced pancakes and paper boats, and the sound of Lily's laughter filled rooms that had been too long used only for echoes. Several concrete changes settled into their days. The routine replaced the emptiness that successful schedules had once tried to disguise. The teddy became a family heirloom, present at every small celebration, its one sewn ear a testament to the idea that things patched with care are stronger for it. Andrew found that he could be generous with time the way he had once been generous with checks. He learned names beyond titles, and he learned to answer the simpler questions first. They taught each other to braid, to fold napkins, to forgive impulsively, and to keep promises with a stubbornness that rivaled any contract. People who had once seen Andrew only as a man of means now described him as someone who showed up, and that reputation mattered more than any list of assets. Everything began with a small question and a small teddy. Today, they shared dinners, homework sessions, and the quiet knowledge that they had saved one another from different kinds of loneliness. The city still hummed, and numbers still mattered, but Andrew had exchanged the idea that money could mend an empty life for a daily practice that did the actual mending. Their story is a proof that wealth without presence is an incomplete sentence, and that the richest lives are those that keep making room for others. If this story moved you, consider subscribing for more accounts of people who found family in unexpected places, and leave a comment sharing the small yes that changed your life. Your yes might be someone else's tomorrow.